She was just a waitress with tears in her eyes. He was a single dad, tired but kind. Their paths crossed on an ordinary night. But what happened next would change everything for both of them. Sometimes a single act of kindness echoes louder than fate. If you believe in second chances, unexpected meetings, and the quiet power of doing the right thing, you're in the right place. Before we begin this unforgettable story, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a moment that could move your heart. Now, let's begin. The storm had rolled in early that night, black clouds dragging across Manhattan like old bruises. Inside his glass-walled office on the 27th floor, Harold Campiano sat alone, swirling a deep amber scotch in his crystal tumbler. Behind him, the city blinked with rain-smeared light. In front of him, muted on a large monitor, a live security feed played quietly the dining floor of a Campiano's restaurant in Brooklyn. He hadn't meant to watch it. He never did anymore. But habit, or maybe something darker, always brought him back to these grainy windows into the lives he once built. Campiano's had become an empire, 12 restaurants in New York, 2 in Chicago, 1 in San Francisco. It should have been enough, but nothing ever filled the hole she left behind. The footage flickered, then steadied. A young waitress crossed the screen, weaving through tables with a practiced grace. Her dark brown hair was tied up in a loose knot held by a gleaming clip that shimmered like pearl under the dining room lights. Something about her gait, about the way she paused to check on a table of elderly women with gentleness, it caught his breath for just a moment. Harold leaned forward. He knew he was being foolish. Over the past 25 years, he'd seen her 100 times at a crosswalk in a subway in the reflection of his glass of wine. Always a stranger. Always not her. But this girl there was something painfully familiar in the curve of her jaw and the shape of her shoulders. Then it happened. A man in a suit at table 12 stood up too quickly. He was flushed drunk, waving his hand in frustration. The girl, the waitress, apologized, bowing slightly, trying to explain something. The wine glass on his table wobbled, then tipped. Red spread like blood across white linen. The man's voice rose audible even through the mic filters. "Are you deaf or just stupid?" Harold tensed. The girl stood, frozen eyes wide but silent, and then she turned to walk away. That's when he saw it. As she tucked her hair behind her ear, her neck turned toward the camera, exposing a small distinct birthmark shaped like a teardrop just below her left ear. Harold's hand went limp. The glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Scotch spread across the polished wood like a stain of memory. He stood slowly moving toward the desk drawer with mechanical precision. Inside lay an old velvet box. He opened it, revealing a photograph of a baby, swaddled in a hospital blanket, her tiny hand curled around a woman's thumb. The birthmark was there. Plain. Unmistakable. Beside the photo was a small silver clip, a pearl clasp that once held back a newborn's hair for her christening photo. It gleamed under the desk light, identical to the one she had worn just seconds ago on the screen. Harold stumbled back into his chair. His hands shook as he reached for the intercom. "Jared," he said, voice low and tight. Sir, the head of corporate security, answered immediately. "I need a full background check on a waitress working at the Brooklyn Heights location. Her name, find her name. Cross-reference all hiring documents, employee files, anything." He didn't wait for a response. Back at Campiano's Brooklyn, Ella Reynolds stood motionless in the break room, blinking away tears. Her apron was stained with Merlot, her hands cold. It wasn't the first time a customer had raised his voice. But tonight, something cracked. It wasn't the insult. It was the exhaustion of pretending it didn't hurt. She turned the old clip in her hair absent-mindedly, a simple thing vintage and chipped at the edges. Her foster mother had given it to her on her 7th birthday, saying, "I found this with you when they brought you in. I always thought it was too fancy for an orphan." Ella never told anyone how often she stared at it, wondering where it came from. Who it came from? The break room door creaked open. A man in work boots and a blue button-down shirt stepped in, carefully holding a roll of electrical tape and a toolbox. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms marked with grease. He had kind eyes. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Ella quickly wiped her face. "Fine. It's just wine, not blood." He hesitated, then pulled a clean napkin from his back pocket and offered it. She took it silently. "You handled that pretty well," he said. "Some folks yell right back." She let out a hollow laugh. "Yeah, well, I need the job more than I need to be right." He gave a thoughtful nod. "I'm Jack. I handle maintenance for the Brooklyn and Tribeca branches." "Ella." "Well," Ella Jack said, glancing toward the kitchen, "I think you've got more strength than you think." She looked at him, then really looked. He wasn't offering pity, just presence. A stillness she hadn't felt in a long time. From outside, a child's voice called. Dad Jack turned. "Be right there, sweetie." Ella watched as a little girl peeked into the doorway, freckles, pink sneakers, and a backpack nearly her size. "Sorry," Jack said sheepishly. "She does homework while I work late. Her name's Lily." Ella smiled, faintly warmed by something she couldn't explain. "Nice to meet you, Lily," she said softly. The girl beamed. "You're really pretty." "Are you going to marry my dad?" Jack groaned. "Okay, that's enough matchmaking for one night." Lily giggled and disappeared again. Ella laughed a real one this time, and Jack looked relieved. Back in his office, Harold stared at the monitor. She was laughing now, carefree, radiant, and it hit him like a punch to the chest. He whispered to the empty room, "God help me." "Is that you, Isabel?" He hadn't said the name out loud in years, but the name tasted like sunlight and warm arms, like a promise broken and still waiting to be fulfilled. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. If this girl really was her, it would change everything. And if she wasn't, he'd lose her all over again. But this time, he wouldn't walk away. The smell of scorched wires lingered faintly in the air as Jack Miller knelt beneath the industrial stove at the Campiano's downtown location. The outlet had blown again, third time this month, and though it was a fire hazard, corporate refused to shut down operations during peak hours. So they called Jack. They always did. He didn't mind. Jack liked the quiet, like the hum of electricity, and the way fixing something with his hands helped silence the static in his head. It was the silence of grief that still buzzed sometimes 5 years since Beth's accident, and it could still swallow him whole if he wasn't careful. But tonight, the silence was interrupted by a voice. "Dad." "I finished all my spelling words." Jack turned, peeking up over the counter. Lily, in her oversized hoodie, was seated at table 6, swinging her legs and beaming like she'd just won an Olympic medal. Her backpack was unzipped crayons and flashcards spilling out like a mini explosion of chaos. He smiled, wiping his hands on a towel. "That's awesome, sweetheart. Let me finish this last wire and we'll check them together." You always say that she teased, but she returned to her drawing content. A waitress passed by with a tray of pasta, and Jack recognized her instantly. Ella, the same girl from Brooklyn. He hadn't realized she'd been transferred downtown. There was something different about her here. Less guarded. Still quiet, but more composed, like someone learning how to breathe again after being underwater too long. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. She blinked, surprised. He gave a small wave, half expecting her to walk past. But instead, she paused. "You're following me now," she said dryly, though her mouth quirked upward just enough to give it away. Jack grinned. "This time, I had a work order. But maybe fate's following you." Ella rolled her eyes. "That's cheesy. I'm a single dad. Cheesy is all I've got." She glanced over at Lily. "Your daughter's cute. She's terrifying. Brilliant, but terrifying. I like her already." He stood brushing dust off his knees. "You like intimidating small children?" "No, I like people who say what they mean." Jack didn't reply at first. Instead, he reached behind the counter, grabbing 2 bottles of sparkling water and handing one to her. "To saying what you mean," he said. She hesitated, then clinked her bottle gently against his. To that. They stood there for a moment, silent but not awkward. There was something comforting in the ease of their exchange, like slipping into a forgotten rhythm. Jack didn't know what it was about Ella, but something in her reminded him of himself from years ago. Lost, but holding on with quiet courage. Then he noticed the hair clip. She bent to tie her shoe, and the light caught it again. A silver clasp shaped like a petal inlaid with tiny pearls. It was old elegant, out of place on someone like her. That's a nice piece, Jack said casually. Ella's fingers brushed it. Yeah. Kind of strange, isn't it? I've had it as long as I can remember. Where did you get it? She shrugged. My foster mom said it came with me. I used to think it belonged to someone rich, like a lost princess or something. Jack chuckled. I can see that. Yeah, well, that was before I learned that foster care doesn't come with fairy tales. There it was again. The wall. He could feel it between them, rising like a shield she didn't even know she was lifting. He decided not to push. Some of the best stories don't start pretty, he said, but they end better than you'd ever expect. Ella tilted her head. Are you always this positive? No, Jack admitted, but I've learned that hope is a habit, and I've got a little girl who watches everything I do. She smiled, small, soft, real. She's lucky. No, Jack said, glancing at Lily with warmth that seemed to radiate from his very core. I'm the lucky one. Ella looked away, but not before he saw the flicker in her eyes. Longing, maybe, or memory. He didn't press it. He just stood with her in the silence, offering presence instead of pressure. Across the room, Harold Campiano stepped into the restaurant's front vestibule, unnoticed, his overcoat damp from the rain. He moved like a man walking through a memory, slow, precise, hesitant. He wasn't there for dinner. He was there for her. From the far end of the dining room, his eyes locked on Ella. She laughed at something Jack said, head tilted slightly, the pearl clip catching light once more. That laugh, it wasn't a stranger's laugh. It was Isabel's. It was the echo of his wife's laughter when they danced in the kitchen with their newborn swaddled in his arms. It was 30 years of waiting and searching condensed into one instant. He stepped forward, then stopped. She looked so alive, so herself. What would he even say? Excuse me, you might be my daughter. No, not here, not like this. He turned and left quietly unnoticed. Later that night, after the restaurant closed, Jack gathered Lily's things as she finished her drawing. Done, she exclaimed, holding up a crayon portrait, a woman with a bun, a man in blue, and a small girl with 2 braids. Ella looked over, eyebrows lifting. Is that me? Lily nodded solemnly. I put you in because you make Daddy smile. He hasn't smiled like that in a long time. Jack turned away, but not before Ella saw the way his jaw clenched and eyes watered just slightly. She knelt beside Lily and whispered, Thanks for including me. I think it's the best picture I've ever been in. That night, as Jack drove home with Lily asleep in the back seat, he kept thinking about Ella. And somewhere across town, Harold stared at his phone, Ella's employee profile pulled up on screen. He tapped the screen once, then once more, and whispered, Please, let it be you. Ella stood at the locker in the back corridor of the Brooklyn Heights, Campiano's fingers fumbling with the dial. Her shift had just ended, but her heart still raced from the unexpected visit by someone she didn't even realize had been watching. The manager had called her in 5 minutes earlier and handed her a corporate sealed envelope. Head office wants you transferred to the flagship in Manhattan, he said with a neutral face, but the tone behind his words hinted at something else. Reluctance, maybe even irritation. Effective immediately. You start tomorrow, no warning, no explanation. Just go. Ella reread the letter for the 5th time. The words blurred, heavy, and strange. Selected for developmental opportunity at Campiano Central. Potential management track. Temporary relocation. Full salary continuation. She'd only worked here 6 months. Before that, she'd bounced between waiting tables and cleaning offices, always one bad shift away from being let go. But now, they wanted her at the flagship on a management track. It didn't feel like a promotion. It felt like being watched. Across the city, Harold Campiano sat in the back of his private car, a black Lincoln with leather seats that always felt colder than they looked. Rain glazed the windows as the driver eased through midtown traffic. "Is she on the schedule for Central?" he asked without looking up from the file in his lap. "Yes, sir," replied Jared, his discreet security chief seated beside him. "Shift starts tomorrow at noon." Harold nodded once. The file in his hands held everything they'd found, what little there was. No birth certificate, no known biological family, registered in the foster system at 18 months, multiple placements, mostly stable but no formal adoption ever completed. And then there was the clip. He held the photo beside the printout of the current video still. Side by side, they were identical. And yet, he was terrified. What if he was wrong? What if he stepped into this and shattered a stranger's life just to try and fix his own? At home that night, Ella sat alone on the edge of her couch, the apartment too quiet around her. Her foster mother had been moved to a care home just 2 weeks earlier, her memory vanishing by the day. The silence in the apartment felt like it was growing claws. She took the clip from her hair and held it between her fingers. Its edges were smooth now, worn down by years of habit. It was her only keepsake, the only thing that had followed her from group home to group home like a ghost of something forgotten. Sometimes she imagined it had belonged to a mother who loved her, who meant to come back. Tonight, for the first time, she wondered, what if that was true? She turned her head toward the small box of belongings she hadn't opened in months. Letters, scraps, a single childhood photograph of her in an unknown garden, with a woman whose face had been torn away by time. Ella opened the box slowly. Inside, tucked into a folded piece of paper, was a hospital tag, Reynolds, female, 3 days. No first name. No date. Just that. She stared at it, her heart a fist in her chest. The next morning, Manhattan greeted her with gray skies and a wind that cut through her coat. The flagship Campiano's looked nothing like the warm, brick-lined Brooklyn location. This place gleamed modern lines, chrome fixtures, velvet curtains on the windows. It felt like a place meant to be looked at, not lived in. The manager at Central, Mrs. Rivera, was a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense bun and the sharp gaze of someone who had survived decades in fine dining without losing a single tablecloth to carelessness. "You must be Ella," she said without smiling. "They've given you 4 days a week, lunches and prep. You'll shadow Emily and Nicole for service protocols." "Yes, ma'am." Rivera studied her for a moment longer, then gave a single nod. "Good posture. Don't smile unless you mean it. Guests can tell." As Ella changed into her new apron and surveyed the dining hall, she felt the air shift around her, not just from nerves. It was like the building knew something about her she didn't. At one corner table sat a familiar pair of eyes, Jack and Lily. He looked surprised but happy to see her standing halfway out of his chair before managing to steady himself. "Well," he said when she reached their table, "look who followed me this time." She laughed, nervous but honest. "Apparently, I've been promoted. Not sure if it's real or a prank." "I like it," Lily chirped. "It's fancy here. The bathrooms smell like vanilla." Ella glanced around. "It's different," Better Jack asked, searching her face. She shrugged. "I'm not sure yet." There was a pause, a space between words where meaning lived. Then Lily slid a napkin toward her. On it was a new crayon drawing. Ella, Jack, and Lily again. But this time there was a fourth figure in the corner, small, older with a cane and a big smile. "That's your mom," Lily said confidently. "The one you're gonna find soon." Ella froze. Jack looked startled, turning toward his daughter. "Lily?" What the girl said innocently. "She's been sad because she doesn't know her real family. But I think someone's looking for her like in those movies where they get separated and then they hug in the rain." Ella's throat tightened. She wasn't sure if she wanted to cry, laugh, or just walk away and hide. But instead, she reached over and squeezed Lily's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's beautiful." Behind the glass wall that separated the dining room from the corporate offices, Harold Campiano watched it all unfold. His heart trembled against his ribs. She had the same way of pausing before saying thank you, the same way of folding her napkin once she stood. Every detail matched what he remembered from long ago. And still he didn't step out. Not yet. He had waited 25 years. He could wait one day more. Ella sat on the worn carpet of her living room floor, the edges of an old cardboard box brushing against her knees. It was well past midnight, but sleep had never arrived. Her shift at Campiano Central had ended hours ago, yet her mind refused to slow. Something was shifting. The air. The way people looked at her. Even the sudden transfer. It didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a setup. But she couldn't tell if it was good or bad. The box before her hadn't been opened in years. She kept it under her bed like a time capsule from a life no one had ever asked her about. Inside were pieces of herself with no glue to hold them together. A baby sock. A postcard from Kansas she didn't remember receiving. An adoption pamphlet with notes in a social worker's hurried handwriting. Then, near the bottom, she found it. A folded envelope with fragile creases and faded ink. Her name was written in shaky cursive on the front. She stared at it, not breathing. It wasn't her foster mother's handwriting. That woman had always printed in all caps block letters like someone afraid of being misunderstood. Ella opened it slowly. Inside was a small black and white photo, her as a toddler, no older than 2. Chubby cheeks, arms outstretched. She stood in a garden with overgrown grass next to a woman whose face was half-turned from the camera, nearly blurred out of frame. The woman's hand rested gently on her shoulder. On the back, a single sentence was scrawled in faded pen. "She wasn't mine by blood, but I couldn't let her disappear again." Beneath the photo was another relic, a hospital bracelet. Reynolds, female. 3 days. That was it. No date, no time of birth, no mother's name. Ella sat back, her breath shallow. She remembered the story vaguely told once when she was maybe 13. Her foster mother had been vague. "You were dropped off at a hospital. No one claimed you. They passed you around for a bit and then I got the call. That's all." But that wasn't all. This bracelet, this photo, the letter. They were pieces of something buried. Something someone had tried to hide, maybe even protect. Her hand moved to the clip in her hair again. Where had it come from? The next morning at Campiano Central, Mrs. Rivera was in a mood. She stood at the host stand, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning like a hawk tracking prey. "Ella," she called. Ella stepped forward, tying her apron. "Yes, ma'am. I'm assigning you to table 21 today. High-profile reservation. Don't speak unless spoken to. Stay sharp." Ella nodded, confused. Table 21 was rarely used. It was reserved for private parties, usually shielded by a tall partition for discretion. No one had told her who was coming. By noon, the atmosphere had shifted. The kitchen was quieter. Even the chef, normally loud and impatient, kept his voice down. When Ella stepped into the dining room, she saw him. The older man, seated at a table 21, wore a navy suit, subtly tailored with a tie the color of aged wine. He looked like someone used to silence the commanding kind. His silver hair was neatly parted, his posture straight, dignified. He looked vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. As she approached with a tray of water glasses, he looked up. Their eyes met. Her breath hitched just for a second. There was something in his face, not recognition exactly, but something gentler, like he knew her laugh from another life. "Good afternoon," she said, voice steady. "Welcome to Campiano's." "Thank you," he replied softly. She set the water down, noticing how his hands trembled just barely when he reached for the glass. Then his eyes fell on the clip in her hair. She caught the movement. She saw how his fingers paused mid-air. She could feel him watching it. "Would you like to hear today's special, sir?" she asked, trying to distract from the way her pulse hammered in her ears. He shook his head. "No, thank you." She left the table, quickly escaping into the kitchen like she'd touched something hot. Harold Campiano sat back breath shallow. The clip. It was her clip. Or one exactly like it. He had stared at the original so many nights he could trace its pattern blindfolded. But it wasn't just the clip. It was the way she stood, the way she folded her hands when she paused, the way her voice had the faintest tremble when she said, "Good afternoon," but never let it crack. His daughter had once gripped his finger with that same resolve as a newborn, so tight he'd laughed through tears in the hospital. He looked down at the table, unsure whether to cry or get up and walk out. He hadn't said her name in years. But it burned on his tongue now like a prayer. Isabel. That night, Ella walked home in the foggy dusk. The air was thick with the smell of rain and concrete, the kind of weather that made old ghosts feel near. Her thoughts swirled the man, his expression the unmistakable way his gaze clung to her. Was it admiration, curiosity, or something deeper? When she reached her building, she paused before unlocking her door. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jack. "Lily says hi. She drew you another picture. I think it's got a puppy this time." Ella smiled. She typed back, "Tell her I'm honored. I needed something soft today." She didn't mention the man. She didn't know why, but something inside her whispered, "This isn't coincidence. It's connection, and it's coming for you, ready or not." The following week passed in a strange kind of limbo. Ella moved through her shifts at Campiano Central like a ghost who remembered the steps of the living but wasn't sure she belonged among them. Every time she approached Table 21, even though the man in the navy suit hadn't returned, her chest tightened. Something had changed. Not in the schedule, not in the food, not even in the rules, but in the way the world watched her. Mrs. Rivera began assigning her to more high-profile tables. The kitchen crew had stopped calling her new girl and started offering her coffee without asking. Even the head chef, a tyrant with a steel temper, asked for her opinion on plating twice. She should have been thrilled. But Ella had lived long enough on the margins of certainty to know when things didn't add up. Jack texted her twice that week. Once to send her a photo of Lily in oversized rain boots standing beside a cardboard sign that read, "Puppies wanted." No puppy, no plan, just optimism. The second text came after a rainy night shift. "If you're ever tired of being polite to strangers, there's always leftover pizza at our place." She never answered. Not because she didn't want to, because she did. Too much. On Thursday afternoon, her break finally aligned with Jack's maintenance visit. He was replacing an air filtration unit in the back kitchen, grumbling good-naturedly as he balanced on a stool that clearly wasn't built for full-grown men. Ella leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching him with a half-smile. "You know, you could just ask for a ladder." "Where's the fun in that?" She tilted her head. "And if you fall?" He looked down at her and grinned. "Then at least I'll be in the right place for dinner." There it was again, that effortless ease between them. The kind that didn't need to be explained, only felt. The kind that made her wonder what it would be like if she allowed herself to just stay. "I got a weird feeling last night," she said quietly, more to the room than to him. "Like I was being watched. Not in a creepy way, just observed." Jack paused, then stepped off the stool. "You think someone's following you?" "No, not like that." She hesitated. "More like someone's looking for something in me. Something I don't know how to give." He nodded, slowly, serious now. "You ever think it might be someone seeing what you don't?" Ella looked down at her hands. "That's the problem. I don't know what there is to see." Jack didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small, hand-carved wooden star. He offered it to her. "What is this?" "Lily made it. Said it was for you." Ella turned it over in her palm. It was imperfect edges, uneven, the middle painted gold. She said, "You looked like someone who forgot she used to shine." Ella's throat tightened. Jack shrugged, trying to play it casual, but there was nothing casual about the look in his eyes. Kids don't lie about things like that. That night, Ella couldn't sleep. She sat on her fire escape, the wooden star in her lap, staring out at the city lights bleeding into fog. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who used to dream she was a missing princess. The one who imagined a mother somewhere painting or dancing or reading by a fireplace waiting for her return. And then she thought about reality. The boxes, the bracelet, the strange man at table 21. It was as if her past had quietly walked back into her life, waiting for her to notice. Meanwhile, inside a townhouse in the Upper West Side, Harold Campiano stood in front of an open safe. He pulled out the photo again. The same clip, the same eyes. He'd asked himself 100 times if he was sure, and tonight he was done asking. He pulled out a folder from the safe, an adoption record filed under sealed. It had been the last traceable clue before the trail went cold 24 years ago. The mother listed unknown. But now he had a name, Ella Reynolds, and a plan. The next day, Ella arrived for her shift early, half in hopes that the kitchen would be quiet, half to breathe. But as she entered, she saw Mrs. Rivera waiting. "Change of schedule," Rivera said. "Mr. Campiano is coming in for lunch. He's requested you personally." Ella froze. The owner, Rivera, gave a clipped nod. The owner. "Why me?" Rivera didn't answer. She just handed Ella a fresh apron and said, "Iron it. And don't be late." When the lunch crowd thinned and the restaurant quieted, Ella walked toward table 21 with a practiced smile and her pulse pounding in her throat. Harold sat alone, his expression unreadable, hands folded. "Good afternoon," she said softly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her face with something like reverence. "Miss Reynolds," he finally said, "would you sit with me? I'm just staff, sir. Not today." She sat, unsure why. Then Harold reached into his coat and pulled out a familiar object, a copy of the same hospital bracelet she had tucked away in her box at home. He set it on the white linen tablecloth between them. Ella's breath caught. "I believe he said gently that you may be my daughter." The world didn't fall silent. It shattered. Not with sound, but with everything it had taken her years to hold together. She stared at the bracelet, then at him, and all she could whisper was, what the bracelet sat between them on the pristine white linen like a detonator, quiet but capable of blowing her world apart. Ella didn't move, didn't blink. Her hands stayed folded in her lap knuckles, bloodless. Harold Campiano sat opposite her, composed in the way only people with practice at grief can be. There was nothing dramatic about his delivery. No tears, no dramatic reveal. Just the calm certainty of someone who'd waited so long for truth that the silence now felt sacred. "I don't understand," she said at last, her voice low and tight. "Why would you think that? Why me?" He didn't reach across the table. He didn't invade her space. Instead, he nodded toward the bracelet. "When you were taken from the hospital 25 years ago, that tag was all that was left behind. The nurses said you were wearing it. We kept it. Hoping." "I wasn't taken," she said quickly, instinctively. "I was left at a hospital, in Kansas. When I was a baby." His jaw tightened. "Yes, because that's where she brought you. After she disappeared from New York. The woman who took you, who raised you, worked in one of our kitchens. She disappeared the same night my daughter was kidnapped." Ella's breath caught. "You think she stole me. I think she was sick. Desperate. And I think she thought she was protecting you in a way only she could understand." Ella stared at him. Her mind flashed to the torn photograph, the letter, the faint tender writing. "She wasn't mine by blood, but I couldn't let her disappear again. I don't remember her ever hurting me," she whispered. "I don't think she meant to," Harold said. "But what she did, it wasn't right. You had a family. You had a name." He pulled a photograph from the inner pocket of his jacket and placed it gently beside the bracelet. In the photo, a younger Harold held a baby in a hospital room, his wife leaning in beside him, smiling. The baby had a head full of dark hair, tiny fingers wrapped around Harold's thumb. Her name was handwritten in the corner, Isabel Ann Campiano. Ella stared at it as if looking too long would make it disappear. "I remember nothing," she said, voice shaking. "I don't remember you. Or her. I don't even remember Kansas that well." "That's okay," Harold said. "You don't have to remember. I just need you to know." The photograph blurred in her vision. She stood up suddenly. "I need to go." "Ella," she shook her head. I'm not ready. I don't know what this means. You don't have to know right now. But you've known," she said. "You've known for what weeks, months you had people watching me, moving me to Manhattan. You've been pulling strings while I've been serving pasta and wondering why everyone suddenly cares if my apron is ironed." Harold didn't deny it. I had to be sure. She backed away. "And what now? You want me to... What, come home with you? Let you rewrite 25 years of someone else's life?" "No," he said softly. "I just want you to know you were never forgotten. Not for one single day." That stopped her. The words didn't feel like a weapon. They didn't sound like guilt. They sounded like mourning. Still, she turned and walked away, the bracelet and photograph left untouched on the table. Outside, the cold March wind slapped her cheeks. She didn't cry. She couldn't. It felt like her body had gone numb, her chest packed with cotton and cement. She walked without direction, block after block, past brownstones and bodegas, construction sites, and yellow cabs. Finally, she ended up where her legs always seemed to take her when the world felt unstable, Jack's apartment. It wasn't glamorous, just a second-story walk-up with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox, but the lights were warm, and the sound of Lily's laughter leaked through the crack under the door. She almost left. Then the door opened. Jack stood there holding a pot of macaroni with a wooden spoon sticking out like a flag of surrender. "Hey," he said, surprised. "You okay?" She looked at him, just looked until her chin wobbled. "I think someone just told me I don't know who I am," she whispered. Jack put the pot down without a word and stepped aside. She came in and collapsed onto the couch. Lily was on the floor drawing another picture, this one of 3 stick figures and a dog with a pink collar. "I made you a puppy," she said proudly, showing it to Ella. "Her name is Toast." Ella laughed a broken sound. "Thank you." Jack handed her a glass of water, sat across from her, and waited. She told him everything. The bracelet, the photo, the man with her face in his eyes. When she finished, Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's a lot. But it doesn't change who you are, doesn't it?" "No," he said. "You're the woman who brings Lily napkins folded into flowers, who works 12-hour shifts and still remembers people's birthdays, who looks at everyone like they deserve a second chance even if no one ever gave her one." She bit her lip hard. "He said my name was Isabel. Do you like it?" She thought for a second. "No. I like Ella." Jack smiled. "Then that's who you are." Late that night, alone again in her apartment, Ella stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked the same. But something inside her had shifted. Maybe Harold Campiano was right. Maybe she'd been taken from a life meant for her. But maybe, just maybe, she'd become someone stronger than that life ever could have made her. She wasn't a missing piece in someone else's puzzle. She was her own. And whatever came next, it would be on her terms. But first, she had to decide, would she run again, or finally turn and face the truth? It had been 3 days since Ella had walked out of Campiano Central with the photograph and bracelet burning a hole in her bag. 3 days of silence. She hadn't returned Harold's calls, hadn't answered Mrs. Rivera's increasingly cryptic texts, and she definitely hadn't shown up for work despite the sense of guilt tugging at her every time she passed a restaurant window. Instead, she stayed in her apartment, her tiny second-floor space that smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish, where nothing fancy had ever happened, and no one had ever called her anything but Ella. It was safe, small, familiar, and suddenly it felt like a lie. She sat on her couch with the photo again, staring at the baby in Harold's arms. Her eyes, Ella's eyes, were crinkled with laughter. The woman beside him, presumably his wife, had the kind of beauty that felt effortless. Her hands were wrapped protectively around both of them, and on her pinky, a delicate ring, a single pearl. The same shape, Ella realized slowly, as the clip she still wore in her hair. She reached up and touched it. The curve of it no longer felt ordinary. It felt like a breadcrumb someone had left behind on purpose. That evening, Jack showed up with takeout and a tired smile. He didn't ask permission. He just set the food on the coffee table and dropped down beside her like he belonged there. Because somehow, by now, he did. Lily was at a sleepover, her first ever, and Jack looked halfway like a man with free time and halfway like a father trying not to call the host family every 10 minutes. Ella didn't say anything for a while. She just leaned her head on his shoulder. Jack let her. I keep thinking, she murmured, that if I open the door to all of this, I'm going to lose myself in it. Like I'm going to become who they want me to be, not who I chose to become. Jack was quiet. Then he said, "You know what I remember most about law school? You went to law school for about 5 minutes, before Lily came along." He smiled faintly. "But yeah, I remember the professor saying something that stuck with me. He said, your name might come from your parents, but your character, that's yours to shape. No court can change that." Ella looked at him. Jack met her gaze. "You're still you, no matter where you came from, no matter what he says." "I don't even know if I want to be found," she admitted. "Part of me still wants to believe my life, this version of it, is enough." He nodded. "But part of you wonders who you might have been." Ella nodded back, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." The next day, she made a decision. Not because she was certain, but because running hadn't brought her peace and maybe standing still would. She called Mrs. Rivera first. The woman answered on the second ring with clipped formality. "I was told not to pressure you," Rivera said immediately, "but I'm relieved you called. Is he still in the city, Mr. Campiano?" "Yes. Can you tell him I'll meet him?" "1 hour, but not at the restaurant." "Where then?" Ella looked out the window, eyes landing on the small neighborhood park where she used to read after late shifts. The place with the rusted bench and the creaky swing. A park in Brooklyn. "I'll send the address." The sun was low in the sky when Harold arrived. He walked slowly, not like a man who was old, but like someone trying to remember how to be gentle. Ella sat on the bench already, her back straight, hands clasped in her lap. She didn't stand when he approached, but she did nod toward the space beside her. He sat. Neither spoke for a full minute. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why didn't you say my name that day?" He turned slightly surprised. At the restaurant, she nodded. "I didn't know if I had the right." That surprised her. "You're my father." "Yes. But you didn't know that, and I didn't want to take something from you without asking." She looked down at the bracelet now resting in her palm. "Isabel," she said aloud, testing it. It sounded soft, formal, like a name meant for someone who knew which fork went with which salad. "I don't remember that name," she said finally. "I know. I don't feel like her." Harold smiled gently. "Then don't be. You don't owe anyone the person you used to be or the one we imagined you'd become." He reached into his coat again and handed her something else. A letter, sealed, yellowed slightly at the edges. "My wife, your mother, wrote this the week you were born," he said. "She kept a journal for you. This was the first letter. We were saving it for your 18th birthday." Ella stared at the envelope. She didn't open it, not yet. She tucked it into her coat pocket like something fragile. Then she said, "I'm not ready to change my name. You don't have to. And I don't know if I want to be in charge of a restaurant empire or whatever it is you think I was meant for." Harold nodded. "Fair. But I am willing to start knowing you." At that, Harold's eyes glistened. "Then that's enough for me," he said. That night, Ella returned home and stood in front of her bathroom mirror again. She didn't look different, but she felt different. Not like a stranger, not like a new person, but like someone who had finally stood in both halves of herself and had chosen to stay whole. She picked up her phone and texted Jack tomorrow night. "Pizza. Your place? I'll bring the napkins." Then she looked at the mirror one last time and whispered to her reflection, "Ella, Isabel, both, and still me." The next few days unfolded like a quiet unraveling. Ella returned to Campiano Central, and for the first time in her life, people looked at her differently, but not in the way she feared. There was no whispering behind her back, no exaggerated courtesy. Just an unspoken understanding, a respect that didn't need to be named. She was still Ella, but now there was a story behind her eyes that even the toughest shift couldn't wash away. Still, the weight of it followed her home. It clung to her shoulders in the silence between conversations. It hummed in the moments after laughter. It waited in the gap between the girl she had been and the woman she was trying to become. Jack noticed. He always did. They sat together that Saturday evening on his back porch, the spring air warm and smelling faintly of cut grass and the neighbors' blooming lilacs. Lily was inside watching a movie, humming softly through the screen door. Ella stared into her lemonade like it held answers. Jack leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You've been quiet. I've been adjusting to being an heiress," he teased gently. She shot him a look, but there was no bite behind it. "Don't start. I'm just saying," he grinned. "If you suddenly show up in a limo, I'll know what happened." Ella sighed. "What if I told you I don't know what I want anymore? Not with him. Not with all of this. I thought finding out where I came from would feel like closure, but it just opened more doors I'm not ready to walk through." Jack's voice softened. "Closure isn't always about slamming a door shut. Sometimes it's just standing in the doorway long enough to breathe." She looked at him, and for a moment there was a stretch of stillness between them, comfortable and electric at once. Then she said, "I still wear the clip, you know, even though I know where it came from now. I don't think it matters where it came from. I think it matters who chose to keep it." She studied him. "You always say the right thing." "No," he said quietly. "I just say the true thing. You're the one who does something brave with it." Later that night, after Ella had gone home, Jack sat alone in his kitchen drinking tea from a chipped mug. The apartment was still. Lily had fallen asleep halfway through her movie, her small hands wrapped around a stuffed bear with one ear missing. Jack glanced at his phone. He'd almost told Ella tonight. Almost told her what Lily had asked the week before, innocently curiously the way only children could ask. "Do you think Ella would ever be my real mom?" He hadn't answered then, and he wasn't sure he could answer now, because as much as he wanted to believe that this thing growing between them was steady and inevitable, he knew too well that some people had been torn apart too many times to trust the stitching. The next day, Ella visited the care home where her foster mother now lived. The building was clean and warm, with soft lighting and nurses who smiled tiredly. The kind of place where time moved slower because there were fewer people left trying to outrun it. Her foster mother, Margaret, sat in a chair by the window staring out at the courtyard. Her once bright eyes were fogged now, her voice faint and inconsistent. Some days she remembered Ella's name. Most days she just called her sweetheart. "Hi, Margie," Ella said softly, kneeling beside her. Margaret turned, blinking slowly. "You brought the sun with you again." Ella smiled. "I think the sun was already here." She took Margaret's hand, thin, papery, but still warm. "I found out something," she said. "Something big." Margaret blinked, distant. "I found out who I was. Before you. I met him." She waited. "Nothing." Then just barely, Margaret murmured, "You always were a gift. I didn't steal you. I just couldn't let go." Ella nodded, tears stinging. "I know," she whispered. "I think I understand now." Margaret reached up slowly, brushing Ella's cheek with shaking fingers. "Still my girl," she said, and then closed her eyes, drifting back into sleep. Ella stayed there a long time, her head resting gently against Margaret's leg, the silence not painful now, but full, whole, forgiving. That evening, Ella returned to her apartment and sat in the quiet. She didn't turn on music. She didn't reach for her phone. She reached for the envelope instead, the one Harold had given her in the park, the one with her mother's handwriting on the front. She opened it. Inside was a letter. The paper was delicate, but the ink had held up. "My darling Isabel. I don't know who you'll become or what your voice will sound like when you laugh, or if you'll grow to love painting or poetry or dancing barefoot in the garden like I did. But I want you to know that from the moment I saw you, I knew you would never belong to me. You would belong to the world. You are not a possession. You are a purpose. And whatever this life gives you, don't ever let them tell you that your softness is weakness. Your kindness will be your compass. Follow it even when you're lost. And if you ever feel far from home, close your eyes. Listen to your heart. That's where I'll always be. With all my love, Mom." Ella wept, not in sorrow, not in anger, but in release. And when the tears dried, she folded the letter, neatly kissed the edge of the paper, and placed it beside her pillow. She didn't know what tomorrow held, but she knew who she was now. Ella, Isabel. Not either or. Both. Whole. Finally. The spring sun peeked through the blinds of Jack's kitchen, casting golden stripes across the worn tile floor. He stood at the counter flipping pancakes with a precision that only came from years of single fatherhood. Lily sat at the table humming and coloring while periodically sneaking chocolate chips into her mouth. Ella had texted late the night before, "Are you home in the morning? I need a place to breathe." He hadn't hesitated. Always. The knock came right on cue. He opened the door to find her standing there in jeans, a hoodie, and that old clip in her hair still clinging, still symbolic. But something about her was different. Her posture, her stillness, the way she didn't flinch at her own presence. "You look," Jack said, then paused, unsure. "Like I finally stopped running," she offered. "Yeah, like that." He stepped aside and she stepped in, inhaling the familiar scent of cinnamon and maple syrup. Lily grinned from her chair. "We saved you the biggest pancake." Ella smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. "That's the best kind." As they ate, the room filled with casual chatter about school projects, which crayon colors were superior, and why pancakes were better than waffles because pancakes don't scratch your throat. But beneath it all, a deeper current stirred. After breakfast, Lily settled on the couch to read, and Jack motioned for Ella to follow him outside. They stepped into the modest backyard, a patch of grass, a tired fence, and a garden box filled with stubborn mint. Jack leaned against the porch railing. "You want to tell me where you've been?" Ella took a breath. "With him. My Harold. We've had a few conversations. It's been a lot, I figured. He gave me a letter," she said, "from my mother, my birth mother. She wrote it when I was born." Jack's brows lifted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. She said, "She knew I didn't belong to her, that I belonged to the world." Jack studied her. "And how does that feel? Like someone handed me a name I forgot I was born with, and it fits, but not like a glove, more like a coat I've grown into." He nodded, then asked softly, "So what?" Now Ella hesitated. "I want to go back, to where it started. Not the fancy Manhattan office, the old Campiano's, Brooklyn. That's where I first felt seen, where someone handed me a napkin and said, 'You're not invisible.'" Jack's throat tightened. He didn't need to ask who that someone had been. "I want to build something real," she said. "Not because it's a legacy or an empire, because it's a place where people matter." Jack met her eyes. "You don't need permission, Ella. You never did." She stepped closer. "Would you help me?" "With what?" "With everything." He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that held disbelief and joy in equal measure. "You're serious?" "I want to open a place," she said. "A small one. Not corporate, not perfect, just honest. With long tables and mismatched chairs and pie that tastes like someone's childhood." Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "You've thought about this a lot." "I've lived it," she said. "Now I want to give it back." Over the next few weeks they made plans. Not grand ones, not glossy or investor-backed. Real ones. They visited the old Brooklyn Campianos together, now closed for renovations. Harold had offered it to her quietly with no fanfare, no conditions. "If it's going to be used again," he said, "let it be by someone who remembers how it felt to cry behind the kitchen door and still show up the next morning." Jack had started sketching layouts. Ella had started writing menu notes on napkins. Lily, ever the mascot, suggested a name, Lily's Table. "Because it's where everything starts," she said with certainty, "and where people come back to." Ella cried when she heard that. Not the sobbing kind. The kind where a single tear falls and you realize your whole life has led to this single quiet moment. One afternoon, while painting the front sign with Jack, Ella asked him, "Why didn't you ever leave?" After Beth died, Jack paused, brush in hand. "I thought about it," he said. "A lot. But every time I looked at Lily, I knew that if I ran I'd miss the miracle that came next." Ella nodded slowly. "You're that miracle too," he added. She looked at him startled. "I know you've been through hell," he said, "but somehow you made it out, not bitter, not angry. Just better. Kinder." Her voice trembled. "Do you mean that Jack smiled?" "I've never meant anything more." They sat on the stoop as the sun dipped low, the new sign drying above them. Lily's Table. Where kindness begins. Ella leaned her head on Jack's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, easy and sure. "I don't know what this is," she whispered. He kissed her temple gently. "It's a beginning," he said. And for the first time in her life she didn't flinch at the idea of staying. She didn't feel like someone living on borrowed space or borrowed time. She felt like someone who had stood still long enough to know this love, this table, this life was hers. And she was finally ready to claim it. The first time the front door of Lily's Table opened to the public, it wasn't with fanfare. There were no press releases, no social media blitzes, no velvet ropes. Just a chalkboard sign on the sidewalk that read, "Grand reopening, come in hungry, leave seen." It was a Saturday morning in late spring. The air smelled like warm pavement and honeysuckle. The sun filtered through the big front windows, bouncing off glass jars filled with fresh-cut herbs and old silverware collected from thrift stores. Mismatched chairs had been sanded and repainted in soft pastels. Handwritten menus sat rolled into napkin rings. Ella stood behind the counter wiping her hands on a clean apron. She glanced around at what they'd built, not perfect but purposeful. Jack emerged from the back, adjusting the music speaker. "You ready?" "Not even a little," she said, laughing nervously. He grinned. "That's a good sign." Lily, standing on a milk crate behind the hostess stand, looked up from the coloring book she'd been using to keep busy for the last hour. "I'm ready." Ella smiled and reached over to squeeze her hand. "Then that makes one of us." The first customers were a retired couple who used to eat at the Brooklyn Campianos every Sunday after church. They paused in the doorway as if trying to reconcile memory with reality. "It smells the same," the man said, voice full of wonder. "Like rosemary and garlic and I don't know." Hope Ella greeted them personally and seated them near the front window. The second group was a young woman and her son. The boy had autism, and the woman nervously asked if it was okay if he made noise. Ella knelt beside him, offered him a basket of crayons, and said, "Hear noise is part of the recipe." By lunchtime, the small space was full. Jack moved between tables, checking on equipment and helping run food. Ella floated from guest to guest, refilling coffee, offering samples of the day's peach tart, and laughing, truly laughing with the kind of ease she never thought she'd find. In the corner, a reserved table remained empty, until Harold Campiano walked in. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored suit. Instead, he wore a blue Oxford shirt, sleeves rolled, hands tucked nervously in his pockets. He paused at the doorway, unsure whether to enter as a CEO or a father. Ella saw him excused herself from the table she was at and met him halfway. "You came," she said. "I wouldn't have missed it." She glanced at the apron he held in one hand. "Is that—" "I signed up for dish duty," he said sheepishly. "If that's allowed." Ella blinked, then laughed, and handed him a clean apron. "Just don't break anything." In the kitchen, Harold washed dishes alongside the teen prep cook who clearly had no idea who he was, and that Ella thought might be the most healing part of all. As she cleared a table later that afternoon, a customer tugged gently at her sleeve. "Excuse me," the woman said. "Are you the owner?" Ella hesitated. "Yes, one of them." "Well, I just wanted to say, this place feels like someone prayed it into existence." Ella's eyes stung, but she smiled. "Thank you. That means more than you know." After the last table cleared, the team gathered in the dining room. Dishes were stacked, chairs lifted. The scent of the last pot of coffee still lingered. Ella raised a glass of lemonade. "To kindness," she said, "and to second chances, and to building a place where no one has to earn belonging." They clinked glasses, even Harold. Then, to Ella's surprise, Jack stepped forward. "I know this isn't on the schedule," he said, voice slightly nervous, "but I have one more thing to say." He looked at her eyes, soft and steady. "Ella, the first time I saw you, you were standing under a fluorescent light with wine on your apron and a fire in your eyes. And I remember thinking, that woman's been through something. But I didn't know then that you'd become someone who could rebuild not just a place, but a heart." He dropped to one knee. The room froze. Lily gasped, "Are you serious right now?" Ella laughed, tears already streaming. Jack pulled out a ring, not flashy, not expensive. Just silver with a tiny engraved lily on its band. "I don't want to fix you. You don't need fixing. I just want to stand still beside you for the rest of my life." Ella opened her mouth, but no words came out. So she nodded, and laughed through the tears, and said the only word that mattered. Yes. Later that night, the restaurant sat quiet in the glow of the cleaning lights. Ella walked through the empty room, fingers tracing the edge of table 6, the one where she first served Lily pancakes she hadn't ordered. The table where her old life had started to end and her real one had begun to bloom. Harold walked in quietly, drying his hands on a towel. "I never thought I'd see this again," he said, looking around. "Neither did I." He took something from his pocket, a small velvet box. "I was going to wait, but I think you're ready." Inside was her mother's pearl ring, not a symbol of wealth, but of intention. "I want you to have this," Harold said, "not because of who you were, but because of who you've chosen to become." Ella held the ring gently, then nodded. "Thank you, Dad." He swallowed hard and smiled. Outside, the sign above the door flickered in the breeze. "Lily's Table, where kindness begins." And behind the glass, in the place where loneliness had once sat, love now had a permanent reservation. Spring melted gently into early summer, and Lily's Table found its rhythm like a song the neighborhood had always known by heart. By 9 every morning, the front windows steamed with the scent of cinnamon rolls and rosemary quiche. By noon, lines began to curl around the block, families, retirees, students, the lonely and the loved, drawn not just by the food, but by something quieter, deeper belonging. Ella had once lived in fear of names, of what they meant, of what they could erase. But now she signed 2 on every form: Ella Reynolds, the girl who endured; Isabel Campiano, the daughter who was found. Both were true. Both were hers. One Monday afternoon, Ella stepped into the back room of the restaurant where a small chalkboard wall displayed scribbles left by guests. "The pancakes taste like Sunday mornings. I came alone, but I didn't feel alone. This place knows my name." She ran her fingers over the words and smiled, heart full. In the corner of the room, Harold sat with Lily, teaching her how to fold napkins into swans. "You're getting better," he said, adjusting her hands gently. "I'm going to be the folding manager," Lily declared. Ella leaned against the doorframe and watched them. Her daughter, because that's what it felt like now with the grandfather she never imagined. Not one of power and suits, but of steady hands and quiet redemption. That evening, just before closing, Jack arrived carrying a picnic basket. He wore his usual blue work shirt and a sheepish grin. "You're not allowed to bring outside food into my restaurant," Ella teased. He held up the basket. "Even if it's homemade lemon bars." She narrowed her eyes. "You're lucky I love you." "That's the plan." They spread a blanket on the roof of the building, an old maintenance access spot they'd converted into their unofficial sanctuary. From up there, the city looked softer, like it too had exhaled. They ate lemon bars and watched the sun melt behind the skyline. Ella rested her head on Jack's shoulder. "I didn't think love would feel this quiet," she whispered. He kissed her hair. "The good kind always does." As dusk deepened, Ella reached into her pocket and pulled out the pearl clip, slightly worn, slightly tarnished. "I think I'm ready to let this go," she said. Jack turned to her, brow raised. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "It carried me when I didn't know who I was. But now, I don't need it to remember anymore." She set it beside the candle lantern they'd lit, its light catching on the mother of pearl. Then, from the rooftop, she looked down at the glowing sign below. "Lily's table, where kindness begins." And she thought of all the kindnesses that had saved her. A man who handed her a napkin when the world mocked her. A little girl who saw her not as broken, but beautiful. A father who never stopped believing even when the whole world told him to. A stranger's letter, written in hope, received in time. A restaurant. A table. A name. The next morning, Ella woke early. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror in a white dress, simple flowing, not flashy. Lily burst into the room in a floral crown she'd insisted on making herself. "Do I look like a flower princess?" she asked breathlessly. Ella smiled at her in the mirror. "You look like the most important girl in the world." "You too," Lily said, then paused. "Are you nervous?" Ella thought about that. "No," she said, surprised by the truth of it. "Not even a little." The wedding was held in the restaurant under the string lights and the hand-painted mural Lily had helped design. Friends, neighbors, staff, and a few guests who had once come in as strangers now sat at the long, mismatched tables, clapping and laughing as Jack and Ella exchanged vows. Harold walked her down the aisle. No speeches, just a quiet moment before he handed her off with a kiss on the forehead and eyes full of peace. When Ella said "I do," it was more than a promise to love. It was a promise to keep choosing joy, to keep staying still even when fear whispered otherwise, to keep building tables, families, bridges, to keep remembering that she was never lost, only waiting to be known. That night, after the music faded and the last guest left, Ella stood alone in the dining room. The lights were low. She walked slowly to table 6, the one where it all began. She sat down and placed her palm on the wood, now worn smoother than before. Then she whispered, "Thank you." For the moment she thought was the end. That turned out to be her beginning. And somewhere out in the city, another woman sat alone at a table wondering if kindness still existed in the world. One day, maybe soon, she'd walk into Lily's table. And Ella would greet her not as a stranger but as someone who understood. Because kindness never forgets. And love always remembers your name. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below and tell us what part of this story touched your heart the most. If stories like this move, you please consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us grow and bring you even more meaningful emotional journeys that celebrate kindness, love, and the beauty of everyday people. Thank you so much for watching. Your time means everything to us. See you in the next story.